Soma, the body as distinct from the soul, mind, or psyche. This is an extremely good title for this game, and you'll find out why. This is good horror, not because of how creepy the game is, but its very concept. When you let it sink in, an existential crisis is imminent. Soma is one of those stories that make you think thoughts that you feel like the universe won't allow you to think. In this game you play as Simon. Simon goes to have a 3D model of his brain done. We're talking a complete copy of every neurological build in his head. He enters the scanner, and when it's over, he is seemingly transported to another world. Development for this game already started back in 2010 while leading up to the release of The Dark Descent. The game would be set on the bottom of the Atlantic, which is something the devs had wanted to try for a long time. When designing the sound for the game, they came up with the room size system. Instead of processing the effects digitally, they recorded the natural reverb of environments like the ones in the game. This led to them making over 2,000 footsteps recording. Not only does it sound really good, but this is extremely useful when you want to immerse the player on a more subconscious level. When it comes to the story, it was overhauled and rewritten many times before they came up with the themes and flows of the story. The game would explore what it means to be conscious and to have a sense of self. This game would serve the story in a more orthodox way by letting the player experience rather than read. Throughout 2013 and 2014, they had released various teasers, trailers, and short films for marketing purposes. The game was released on the 22nd of September 2015. The game was very well received. Players praised the thought-provoking and impressive writing of the story. They loved the atmosphere. They acknowledged that it didn't have the same impact as Amnesia, but is a much stronger game. Instead of having the game built towards one big twist at the end, it was more about how scary it can be to accept one's reality. People even went as far as calling it the ideal survival horror game, a game that all games of the genre should strive to be. The story and design is definitely where the game is strongest. Most criticism came towards the monsters. Although the monster encounters are intense and unique each time, they had very little screen time. Not only that, but they were way too easy to get around. This made it so that towards late game, players would just find them annoying as they pose an obstacle for the story. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. We start by listening to the main character Simon and a woman driving. She asks about him bleeding, to which he explains that since the accident he always bleeds from his head. We hear about a brain scan and we get the name David Munshi. He tells Ashley, the woman, that he needs to tell her something but says that there is never enough time. Ashley is about to question this as they crash in the car. Simon wakes up startled. Already here we have some mystery rising. It's quite evident that Simon has gotten some kind of trauma from a car crash where he got brain damage. He was woken up by a call from David Munshi. Simon has to have his brain scanned by Munshi, but he has to drink the tracer fluid first. Looking around the apartment, it feels very ordinary, in that there's not really an atmosphere other than, well, apartment. Immediately, however, I was struck by how gorgeous the game is. It is a huge visual upgrade from the two Amnesia games. The physics also feel a lot smoother. This game lives up to the frictional game's guarantee of being able to throw and pull on everything that isn't tightly strapped down. It took me an embarrassingly long time to find the tracer fluid, but eventually I did and was able to leave for Munshi's office. While on the metro, Jesse calls you from work. He says that it's okay that you're not coming in today. I know that you can forget to send the email, which can lead to a different outcome. The game is already showing us that our actions have consequences. You arrive at Munshi's office to find it empty. It's dark and deserted. When you look in Munshi's inbox, you can tell that he and his associates are very excited about this scan. After scavenging the entire office, you find Munshi in the back, who is getting the scanner ready. Munshi explains that the scan will help with neural reconstruction, which can help reverse brain damage. Simon gets in the scanner as Munshi prepares it. He starts it up and the scan commences. When Simon gets out of it, the world looks way, way different. You're in some kind of futuristic facility and Munshi is nowhere to be seen. As a matter of fact, the whole place looks roughed up and abandoned. Simon is greatly confused by this. Not only is it not Munshi's office, but it's unlike anything the regular person knows. The only way out of this room is by breaking the window. Out here you can remove the lock on the door. Everything looks desolate and mechanical. The hallways are in red lighting, symbolizing some kind of impending threat. As you explore, you encounter many run-down robots as well as this weird mechanical growth thing that comes out. Currently, the theory is that Simon was transferred to an alternate reality or some kind of, or he was teleported somewhere. When you approach one of the robots, you can touch them, which seemingly allows you to tap into their memories. This one heard someone ask if it talked, then the person shut them down. Immediately after that, the door is blown open and it sounds like something is moving around out there, but you're safe for now. When you leave, you find a door previously locked, also blown open. In here, you find the culprit. One of the robots got activated and started riding down the rails on the roof. The whole atmosphere is so dark and cold. All the life you encounter is, well, machinery. Suddenly the power dies and only the red lights pierce the darkness. In this first room you find an Omni tool. This thing will be your main workhorse for this game. When you leave, one of the ceiling vents burst open, and I was convinced that it was some alien isolation type stuff where something would get you from above, but you're actually safe here. At the end, you find this place where you can use the Omni tool, but it seems you need a chip for it to work. You can find these data buffers on the walls that you can listen to. In this one, you can hear two people trying to get to a place called Theta. They've permasealed the facility, which is stopping whatever is after them. You can put the Omni tool into these terminals that are scattered around. Here you can do many things, but now you just need that chip. In the terminal you can open the toolbox attached to it. This is where you get the chip. Now you can go through this door. For the first time you get a glimpse of the outside. The facility is at the bottom of the ocean. You have this really moody moment as you see that the outside is as lifeless as the inside of the facility, which we can now see is called Upsilon. In the data buffer you find out a little more about what happened, saying Upsilon got swarmed by psychotic machines. These two were also heading to Theta. In the next room you hear someone ask for help through the machines. Here you encounter this for the first time. This thing will heal you completely if you let it suck on your hands. To progress from here, you gotta enter the vent. I just love the way this game looks. It's so alien but also pretty unique. In the vents you can hear the sounds of the facility. You hear distant thumping as well as metallic scratching. On the other side, you find this robot that's plugged into the healing things. Simon tries to talk to it as it is the first sentient thing he's encountered. However, as you unplug it, it pleads you to stop, saying it was so happy, and then it dies. In here, after unplugging the robot, you can activate the facility. The lights comes and everything comes on. But as you look closer, you can see various place names that show offline status, except for one, Lambda. A woman named Catherine tries to contact you from there. She seems confused though. Simon begins talking to her, explaining everything, but is evidently still really confused. Catherine tells you to go upstairs to the comm room and then you lose contact. As you make for the stairs, you have your first real monster encounter. It's this big glowing thing that thumps around. It kinda looks like the robots from earlier. You dodge it and move upstairs. Right below the comm center, you hear a confused man asking what's going on in the next room over. To get up to the comm center, you have to fix the mechanism by shutting down some terminals so that the door can have enough power. You enter the room with the voice to discover another robot, but the robot insists that it is a man named Carl Semken, and not a robot. When you shut down this vent thing, the robot begins to cry out in agony. I immediately ran up to turn it back on, then I searched high and low for a different solution. I even found the body of Carl Semken, but the robot keeps insisting that it is Carl. I heard more people trying to get to Theta until I decided that I was gonna have to shut down that vent or AC thing. You listen to the tortured cries of the robot as you enter the comm center. The choices in this game has no real impact on the ending or the story in general. It's more about their off-screen implications. We don't know how long that robot will suffer for now. We've progressed, but it's stuck there. Up here you can listen to these recordings. In them we listen to Carl and his group preparing to evacuate Upsilon and go to Theta. You contact Catherine in Lambda. Here Catherine is puzzled when Simon says that he got transported into Pathos 2, the whole settlement, directly from Toronto. We get our next objective as the facility collapses around you. You have to find a shuttle train and go to Lambda. Eventually you get completely submerged in water, only to find that you can breathe just fine. Not only that, but you can talk and the pressure has no real effect on you. When you look on your arms, you find it to be in some sort of diving suit. You get out onto the ocean floor. Out here, it feels slightly more safe. There's marine life, but the structures look like they've been abandoned for a while. These underwater sections are incredible. Not only do they look really good, but the low visibility and darkness makes it hard to spot threats. It's also very easy to get disoriented if you panic. You find a data buffer where you hear that the evacuation of Upsilon didn't go very well, but some are still going to Theta. As you approach, you find this helper bot that's really cute. It helps you enter the shuttle station. However, of course, you can't just enter and be off to Theta. You gotta fix the power regulator. You go through a classic frictional games caving section and make it to this half-dead woman that's infested with the weird cable organism. She says that nothing is allowed to die, but as you pull out the stuff from this power box, she dies. But now you can go back and ride the shuttle. You take off for Lambda. On the way, you hear of the meaning of Pathos 2. They have a space gun that can launch projectiles into space. They can launch spaceship and stuff from it. Of course, it's not gonna be a smooth ride all the way to Lambda. The shuttle crashes. Now you gotta get to Lambda on foot. You speak to Kat. She tells you that the tunnels up ahead are closed and you need to find a maintenance hatch. The dark, rusty tunnels are cloaked in a dim red light. You feel isolated. To find the hatch, you just gotta go through this little vent and climb up this ladder. Here I found that I forgot the Omni tool, so I had to go all the way back. On the way back, your vision gets static and you see a figure by the shuttle. After getting the Omni tool back, you can get out of the tunnel. Now we're back in the water, and after a short walk, you've made it to Lambda. As you walk down this corridor, you hear some struggling and Catherine tells someone or something to get away. Then you meet the Flesher. This thing can be quite difficult to deal with. It's blind and deaf. It only reacts to proximity and your gaze. It will seemingly teleport to random areas. As long as you stay away and don't look at it, you should be fine. A good thing is that it makes a lot of noise, so you can track it through that. They don't kill instantly, they knock you out and go away. Now you go meet Catherine, but to Simon's disappointment, she is another machine. But she says she was human once. She reveals that Simon is also a robot now, but he brushes it off in his panic. Catherine says she was in the middle of something. She asks you to put her into your Omni tool. It's pretty easy to do, and now you can speak to her on the terminals. Already here, it's shown that Cat is basically poofing in and out of existence, so relative to her, the time between plugging her in is just a brief shimmer of darkness. She tells you about the Ark. It's her project. It has many brain scans like the one Simon got at the start loaded into a computer world that they're gonna launch into space with the space gun. She tells you that a comet took out the Earth's surface and the only ones still alive are the ones underwater. Here she also confirms that she and Simon are brain scans that were activated inside a form of computer. She says that she is from an early scan, so she actually has no knowledge of what she has done since then. She finds a few files, but Simon needs to help her with opening them. Kat finds it strange that an old scan from Toronto in 2015 somehow made it into Pathos too. You go to recover the Ark. Data. You find schematics, concept art, and some interviews with the workers. I think I forgot to mention it earlier, but Simon was transported into the 22nd century. Here you have to use this tracking program to find the Ark's location. You narrow it down to a site named Tau. It needs to be at Phi, however, because that's where the space gun is. Simon suggests that Catherine and him load themselves onto the Ark. The two agree to go to Theta so they can see if the Dunbat is still in working order and to get some stuff so they can descend into the abyss. They're gonna try and find a shuttle train, but worst case, Simon will just walk there. You move on. Lambda is in even worse shape than Upsilon. Parts are collapsed and others are flooded. You find a broken shuttle, but decide that you're better off with a working one, which I thought was fair enough. Now you get to one of the most intense parts of the game. You enter another shuttle hub where you face off against the Flesher again to get to a shuttle. In there, you find out that you need to override the power to get it going. Now you gotta go out and face off against the beast once more. You fix the power and make your way back in a haste. You're off to Theta. But this shuttle eventually crashes as well. You get knocked out, and when you wake up, you climb out. And now you have to get to Theta on foot. Upon leaving the wreck, you reunite with an old friend. While roaming around here, you encounter this robot that's just swimming around and talking to himself. You have to do this little signal minigame and you can enter Delta. In here you find writing on the wall. The other room is just in chaos, just in general. However, at the next door, your little friend helps you open the door. In here you find some blueprints for the robots and some messages about the evacuation to Theta, but you sadly can't play chess. In here you also find a map that you can use to locate Theta. You end up calling a transport blimp. When you plug Cat in, you realize that you have to find a new tool chip for the blimp. Catherine suggests that you stun a robot and steal its chip, stating that it's just a robot. Simon argues that it's a little too much, but eventually gives in. It's pretty disturbing actually. As you chase the robot, it cries out in pain, but eventually you get the chip. Simon is clearly remorseful about it. It's really beginning to hit Simon that he is basically just a program in a robot. The ride to Theta is incredibly moody. The water is dark and misty, every once in a while you see a structure poke through the darkness. You hear muffled sounds of marine life. It really complements the previous moment where the dark reality of Simon's situation is sinking in and shows that he is really ruminating on what he did to the robot. Catherine compliments Simon and says that with the Dunbat they can easily get into the abyss, which is 4 kilometers underwater. Simon seems very distant and lost in thought. Here we have the theme of identity coming in. Simon has a hard time understanding how he can feel like himself when he is basically a random robot 100 years into the future. Catherine then warns him of the psychological toll that these thoughts can have on someone and says he should stay more or less ignorant to not lose his mind. Kat also tells of the WoW. The WoW is the AI that has created the monsters and has gone rogue throughout Pathos 2. We learn that it has no real motivation and just kinda does random things. You arrive at Theta. Here you get a good view of the massive structure that is Theta. Now you just have to disable this super complicated locking mechanism and you can open the big gate. Theta is in slightly better condition, but still completely abandoned. You plug in Kat and she finds the Dunbat. Simon asks about what the Ark is like. Kat explains that it's basically an ultra-immersive simulation that can sustain itself in space for millennia. The Dunbat is quarantined, sadly. To lift it, you need a security cipher. You have to find it. The first place you go to is the lab/dormitory. Here you can explore the rooms of the staff. Eventually you get to Catherine's own scan room. Here you can find this terminal with different scans on it. Simon finds himself on there. You can listen to audio recordings from the period after the scan, which is pretty haunting. The files detail the period between the scan and Simon's death a month later. Simon's brain was then stored until it activated a few hours earlier inside this body. The data buffer reveals that Catherine may not have the best moral compass. One of her subjects killed themselves, and it's apparently a pretty regular thing with these scans. She didn't report it out of fear that her project would be discontinued. In the storage area, you find a functioning memory chip which could potentially have the cipher on it. The terminal that you need to extract it from has completely lost connection, however, so you gotta go downstairs and reset a router. While descending the stairs, you can hear the screeches of monsters. This encounter is awesome. The way the monster thumps around and gurgles, the darkness of the room. This monster is the proxy. Proxies are employees who have been mutated with structure gel by the WoW. They are blind but have very good hearing. They can even hear you turning your flashlight on and off. They move quite slowly but will sprint insanely fast if they notice you. In the game files, there is apparently unused vent crawling animations for it. If things went a little differently, these things would also be crawling around the vents. Resetting the router is also quite the task. You have to flick this switch, but as you do so, the proxy approaches from behind. A timer appears and you have to flip it again to confirm the reset. Although this encounter is pretty easy, it's still incredibly creepy and stressful. Now we should be able to load the memory chip. You can load it up to this terminal where you gotta find someone who might know a security cipher. You find a Brandon Wan. This next part is honestly quite fucked up. You load him in kinda like you were in the beginning, but you do it over and over again. You need to find the best environment and companions to keep him calm long enough for the simulation to stay stable. You end up tricking him by having Catherine pretend to be a woman named Alice. He gives you the security cipher. After doing that, you can either erase or leave Brandon's data intact. Erasing him will effectively put him to rest, but leaving him will also leave the chance that all of this could happen to him again. Anyways, now you can lift the quarantine on the Dunbat. You enter the Dunbat's habitat. Upon activating it, it cries out in agony, stating that everything is Catherine's fault. Then the Dunbat falls and is destroyed. The whole room loses power. To get out, you have to climb through this vent. As you climb through the vent, you hear a proxy below you, but you don't see it through the grill. In the next room, you plug in Catherine to give her the bad news. Now your only shot is to go to Omicron, find a power suit, and then take the elevator into the abyss. Catherine then realizes that there is a prototype of the Ark in this general area and asks you to power it up so she can see how to get them on. On one of these terminals, you can take a survey for the workers on the Ark project. You can also find this full-body scanner that Catherine makes you enter. It turns out that Simon is inhabiting the body of a woman named Imogen Reed. She's one of Kat's old colleagues. When plugging in the Ark, you have to load the correct modules without using all the storage. You also load up a test dummy, and then you run this simulation where you have to pause it at the right time. After Catherine learns how to load Simon and her onto the Ark, they decide to go to Omicron, get the suit, and enter the abyss. Before you can leave the area fully, however, you have another encounter with the proxy. You have to sneak through these hallways to get a chip that goes in the elevator. This encounter is super tense. You navigate the maze-like halls and rooms while listening to that thing thump around. Activating the chip was super stressful because the proxy passes right by the opening. Eventually you enter the elevator. You go down to the transport station, however, before you get there, the elevator breaks down and you gotta exit through the roof. You do get to a transport platform though. Shortly after getting here, you get viciously attacked by a monster, but this is supposed to happen. You wake up to a woman's voice. It's Ashley, the girl in the car in the beginning. She's acting very nonchalant. When Simon asks what happened, she simply says they fell in love. You wake up in Pathos 2 again. You tear yourself from the wall and you're still on the platform. Right here, I noticed how reminiscent of Dead Space this game is. Like, it's not a ripoff, but you can see that the devs took inspiration from it. Soon you encounter the proxy once more. It's completely dark with flickering lights. After some tense close calls with the thing, you get to this vent. While inside, you can hear the monster echo through the dark, empty halls. The sounds and the red lighting really keeps you on edge, even though you're basically safe here. That's one thing frictional games does extremely well. You never truly feel safe. When you get to the end, you can hear something on the other side. The screen tears as you hear muffled whispers. The encounter isn't over yet, however. Eventually, you get to this panel where you can restore the power, and now you can leave. You get to this big flooded hall where you have to parkour your way to the other side. In these pipes, you can lift the emergency lockdown, which will allow you to actually leave the facility. You hear the proxy screech, which most likely will send you bolting. Then you get flushed by this water and end up outside. If you touch this body, you can hear panicking staff members trying to get to Omicron. You begin walking. You pass these flooded iron bubbles until you get to this big abandoned facility. This is Omicron, but it's locked. You have to find a way in. You speak to Catherine. Simon asks how she's so okay with just being a box. She says she doesn't feel that different from when she was a human. She asks Simon why he is so obsessed over this and asks if he truly feels different from before. To which he answers no. Simon then has a realization. Much of who he thought he was depended on his surroundings. He misses Toronto because he fits in. He knows his place. Here, well, it's a very different story. By solving this panel puzzle, you start the generator. To lift the lockdown, however, you need to enter a code. It's easily found on the other panel. You lift the lockdown. Simon is immediately suspicious. He was practically handed the code, so he feels that something is luring them in. You still can't use the main entrance, so you enter through a side door. You are now in Omicron. Upon entering Omicron, you see that it is in the exact same state as the rest of Pathos 2. The whole place is in lockdown. You speak to Catherine. She proposes that Simon's mind needs to be transferred into a body that's already in a power suit. Simon isn't a big fan of the idea, but agrees anyways. Shortly after that, you find a power suit with a deceased wearer. You try to power up the suit, but you find out that you gotta find 3 things: a cortex chip, structure gel, and a battery pack. These things should make you able to transfer bodies. Simon still isn't a big fan of the plan, however. As you begin looking around for the parts, you begin encountering various sudden flickers on screen as if something is interfering. The first step is, of course, to lift the lockdown. You can only lift it on 1 floor at a time. Here in the midsection, you can retrieve the structure gel. To do that, you gotta solve this puzzle where you have to replace a broken chip in this machine so you can open the case where you can retrieve the structure gel. Pretty simple stuff, even though I spent 20 minutes trying to figure it out. When you leave after that, an apparition appears and it wants to speak to you about something important. If you go to the room right across from you, you get this almost terrifying scene where Simon sees himself for the first time since waking up and can of course barely recognize himself even as human. After this, you go to the upper floor. By one of the entrances, you can find these bodies. When you touch them, instead of listening to their memories, you just get static. Perhaps this is because all of them are missing a head. Up here, you get the batteries and you meet a new monster. This is the robot head. This is probably the easiest monster to deal with. If you keep your distance, you're gonna be fine. But if you see her get riled up, stand still until she goes back to crying. She doesn't attack unless provoked. After making it out, the apparition comes again and tells you to poison the well. Now you go downstairs to get a cortex chip. After solving this little minigame, you get it from this little robot. Now you have all the pieces and you can return to the power suits. In here we can listen to these audio recordings from people trying to reach Tau, the place we're going to right now, but they're completely radio silent. The words "eternal nightmare" also flash on screen. On the way back to Cat, Robot Head scares the crap out of you and gives chase suddenly. This is scripted. You assemble the pieces and get in the pilot seat. You get transferred to the power suit. Immediately after, you hear the Simon outside saying that something is wrong. When you get outside, you see why. Catherine didn't transfer you. She copy-pasted you, creating 2 Simons. We were simply lucky that we were the ones that got into the power suit. Cat puts the old Simon to sleep. Simon explodes on Catherine after this revelation. Cat is clearly desensitized, having worked with this for so long. She didn't think about how the old Simon would wake up alone, scared and confused in an eternal nightmare. Now you get the choice on whether to leave the old Simon or deactivate him. I chose to deactivate, since being stuck here seems horrible. After this, you go out to the lift to descend into the abyss. You climb in, set up the machine, and begin your descent. Simon immediately begins asking about an afterlife. Since the real him died a century ago, is his place in heaven taken? And what about the copy that they just killed at Omicron? He states that he, by sheer luck, won the coin flip and woke up in the body he was supposed to. Catherine stays silent until Simon begs her to say something. She tells a story of when she watched over Taipei as a kid. She felt alive and connected to the world in a way that she never has. She tried to recapture the feeling to no avail. Simon says that he does not feel connected to the body and world he is in right now and asks if it would be different on the Ark. Catherine says that he can make a new life on the Ark, but is suddenly cut off as all power goes out. When you get it back on, Catherine continues where we left off and is only interrupted by the realization that the lift isn't moving. But you move on. Suddenly, the apparition returns, gets real close, and rejoices at your progress. It says it will make preparations for your arrival at Tau. You pass out shortly after and wake up near the bottom. Now you gotta head through the abyss to Tau. This next section is fucking incredible. The water is pitch black here instead of midnight blue. Your vision is blurred from the pressure and you listen as that pressure slowly weakens the structures around you. You go around turning on the power as you progress. As you get closer, the storming current hits you like a hurricane. A little after that, you have this part where you follow this robot through complete darkness with a tiny light. It's here that you see it for the first time, the Leviathan. It's a giant squid that has been heavily modified by the WoW structure gel. Now you gotta follow these little green lights. I can't help but to think that this cave part is a direct reference to Penumbra Overture. The lighting fits and it has all these water spiders everywhere. Then finally you reach Tau. Already here at the entrance it looks different. It's not the design we're used to from the past 6 hours. It's more like a submarine than a spaceship. It's grey and dark instead of sterile and bright. One thing, the doors take an anxiety-inducing long time to open. Here you already know what to do, find the Ark. As you move up this cramped corridor, you hear the alarm go off as if someone is trying to enter. Here at the end, after waiting centuries for this door to open, you encounter him. Jin Yoshida. He is without a doubt the hardest monster to deal with. He is super hard to hide from and he's incredibly fast. You can stop him temporarily by making eye contact, but eventually he begins sprinting at you again. He's super hard to evade. You just gotta keep moving and praying. After what is definitely the scariest moment in the entire game, you get to the most beautiful ladder you've ever seen in your life. The ladder that will take you away from Jin Yoshida. You finally arrive in this conference room. It's worth noting that Tau is completely overgrown with structure gel. It sounds and looks like Tau was ground zero for the WoW outbreak. You have to find the Ark and load it onto the cargo conveyor. You find it up here with the first living person we've seen this whole game. This is Sarah Lindwall. She is under the impression that there are still people here. Simon tells her that he's been around the whole of Pathos 2, and Sarah realizes that she is the only living human left on the planet. She gets very defensive when you mention that you're after the Ark. She's been guarding it for so long, but she admits that she doesn't have the strength to stop him, so she lets Simon take it. Then she asks him to put her out of her misery. Now it's up to you. I chose to let her slip into eternal rest. After disabling her life support, she asks you to stay with her in her final moments. In her final moment, she speaks of her short life and how she wishes she was with her friends. Eventually, she slips away, and all that's left to do is launch the Ark. After a rocky loading process, you send the Ark towards the space gun. Now you just gotta follow the Ark through this tunnel. As you progress further, the static apparition comes back, telling you that you're getting so close. Eventually, you get to this collapsed section and you gotta go out and around through these disabled ruins. It comes back. It needs you to stop the WoW. He mentions that the WoW basically destroyed everything if it wasn't apparent already, but now that we have the gel inside us, we can poison and kill the WoW. Shortly after that, you arrive at the WoW core. Here you have a choice. Either you leave the WoW be or you kill it. Either way, the next thing that happens is the same. He's about to put you down since the WoW can't completely die while you're still alive, but the Leviathan shows up and takes him out. Now you gotta escape the Leviathan. This is the only time that it's actually a threat to you. It was mainly a tool to keep you on edge until now. It's still fairly easy though. You re-enter the facility after evading it. Now you're at Phi, and the only thing left to do is launch the Ark. When talking to Kat here, you get an exact time. May 11th, 2104, 3:30 AM. So if the game is in real time, that means Simon woke up between 9 and 10 PM, May 10th. When touching this body, we find out that it's Catherine. They were debating whether to launch the Ark, since launching it would risk its destruction. Catherine wanted to launch it, and the altercation got physical with one of the others, and then he killed her by accident. Right next to her body, you find a shell that can launch the Ark. You just gotta pick up the Ark and put it in. Now you gotta launch it, and Catherine will get the both of you on board. You get into this pilot seat where you load the bullet. You push the launch button and it's time to get on and away from Earth. You upload your data and the bullet is off. But do you remember back when you got that power suit, how that was done? Well, this time you lost the coin flip. You're still in Pathos 2 as a copy of Simon is launched into space with the Ark. This of course sends Simon over the edge. He hurls insults at Catherine, is confused and refers to the copies as imposters. Catherine tells Simon to relax and be happy that there are copies of them in the last living trace of mankind. Meanwhile, the facility is slowly shutting down in the background, and it gets darker and darker, emphasizing that this is the end. There's nothing left to do, nowhere left to run. Then Catherine's chip is overloaded from stress, and she basically dies. Now you are completely alone in the dark. For how long? Who knows? The credits roll, but there is a post-credit scene. Here we see from the Simon that got on the Ark. It's gorgeous. The broken facility has been replaced with the beautiful sight of trees and the sky. Eventually you meet Catherine by the water. The last sight you're left with is of the Ark as it floats deeper and deeper into space. The game ends. Soma leaves you with a lot to think about. The whole plot of this game is just mind-bending. All of the scary possibilities that get presented is definitely the real horror of the game. The game doesn't play all that different from the previous covered in this series. I mean, the inventory system is simplified and the game looks incredible, but I did spot some more prevalent differences in the core gameplay loop. First of all, they lean away from the physics-based puzzles and go into some more technical type of stuff, where you use in-game computers and do minigames, stuff like that. I do prefer the puzzles in the previous games though. The monster encounters, however, are excellent in this game. Each monster is unique to deal with and they don't overstay their welcome. I much prefer it this way rather than have monster encounter after monster encounter. From an atmospheric standpoint, I think that this is probably the loneliest game I've ever played. Everything is run down and abandoned. The monsters are the only real signs of life left. Normally when you're alone, you at least have nature and stuff around you, but here you don't even get that. Just dark and dead hallways of a research facility. Also, how everything is so mechanical, it really adds to this very cold atmosphere. This game's story is probably its best source of horror. It understands that if you truly want to frighten someone, you have to punch deep into the human psyche and sense of existence instead of just boo, spooky monster. This game attacks our sense of identity directly by asking what it means to be human. Now, many pieces of media have asked this question before. It's not new, but the way it's presented here is so raw, aggressive, and outright disturbing. But the game wants you to ponder it yourself by having the choices be mostly about the off-screen implications. You can feel Simon's sense of self change constantly throughout the game. First, he has no real empathy towards the robots because, well, they're just robots. But upon seeing how they act and coming to terms with his own situation, he begins to see them as human. Like when he kills the robot with a stun baton, it's very evident that he feels awful about it as he does it. Catherine, on the other hand, is completely cold when it comes to them. She has researched this stuff for a while, so I doubt that she's unaware of the consequences it has caused, but she almost seems in denial about it. In the beginning, the game will have you believe that Simon somehow traveled to the future or some alternate reality, but it doesn't take long for you to find out that the original Simon died back in 2015, and you are basically just a copy of his consciousness that has been activated inside a makeshift robot. Can you be you, even if you're not really you? Weird question, but it makes sense in context of this game. Over the course of the game, Simon also realizes how much of his identity was actually made from the world he lived in. He feels incomplete outside of the parameters of that. The ending to this game gave me absolute chills. The way that the facility slowly shuts down as Catherine dies and Simon is left as the last sentient being on Earth, trapped 4 kilometers underwater in a cold, dark ruin. Will he be stuck there forever? Who knows? Those are the questions that will tattoo this game onto your memory. Before I climb back into my hole, I would like to bring up that this game brought back custom stories, and I played a few of them. I was thoroughly impressed with Extinction Echoes of Rain. You should check it out. Anyways, that's it for today. Bye.